All right, here we go. Welcome back to the Scarlet Faithful podcast. This is my rapid reaction to the news that Cliff Omoruyi is returning to Rutgers basketball for the 2023-2024 season. Obviously, huge news and really positive news when we needed it. His potential departure would have been a huge blow for next season. He's now returning, and what does it mean? I mean, in a way, it means everything, right? I think that Cliff is he brings balance to the team next year on the court as a defensive rock, a rim defender, offensively, his athleticism, his ability to play above the rim, his rebounding reliability. He brings so much. And while I was skeptical and worried that he was going to leave based on potential G League opportunities, ultimately he chose to return. I am being told, I was told yesterday it was right up until, the deadline, basically. The deadline's today, right? Wednesday, May 31st. This was not the type of thing where, he was just waiting to announce. The decision-making process, he had a couple workouts late in the process. So this really went down to the wire. His statement, let's see here. I just want to read it. Specifically, he posted on Instagram right at 1 o'clock. We're recording this right at 1:20. This is Cliff Omoruyi writing on Instagram, announcing his return. I've built a legacy at Rutgers. Coach Pikiell has a vision for this program to compete for a national championship next season, and I believe in his vision. I plan to fulfill my promise to my mom to finish what I started and to graduate with a college degree. I'm excited for what's to come. Rutgers Nation, are you ready? So certainly like his style and how he wrote that. Competed for a national championship. When I interviewed Cliff last October, he said that his plan was to win a national title and then go into the NBA. Obviously, they weren't able to win a national title, but he still, I think, the options that were there. He had the G League as an option. Would he have signed a two-way deal? I think it's very possible. Maybe he didn't get a guarantee. He definitely had some opportunities overseas. But at the end of the day, Cliff has always stated he wants to play in the NBA. And hopefully the feedback he got from NBA teams is go back to college, work on X, Y, and Z, and you're a viable candidate to be drafted next year. So what are those things he probably has to work on? I know they've talked to him about his ball handling. The NBA is a completely different game than the college game. So ball handling, but, he has to develop more offensively. His mid-range game, I know he tried to shoot threes last year. It didn't go particularly great. I do think Rutgers is going to have to find a balance in his development for the pros and what they need most out of him, which is rim defending, rebounding, and scoring in the interior. Now, everyone would benefit from the fact that if Cliff can become a more reliable, more efficient scorer on the block, in the post, not something that he did particularly well last year. Cliff has always been best in space when he's mobile, either in transition, but when they move him around. 2 years ago, he tied the nation lead in dunks. I think it was 78 or 79, and a lot of those were alley-oops. They were able to get him the ball in the air, and he was able to capitalize. And they weren't able to do much of that last year, not nearly as much. I need to look it up, but he was much more stagnant. He was much more flat-footed. He was posting up, trying to score that way, where he's always been better in space. So yes, they need to work on that. He needs to work on that. But what I like about this in terms of the way the roster looks is you have Noah Fernandes. I looked it up today. UMass was a top 75 team in terms of tempo all 3 seasons he was there. Rutgers is going to have a real opportunity to play a more up-tempo style next year, and I do think that will benefit Cliff. His athleticism is, pretty much unmatched. He arguably is the most athletic big man in the country. He can't be contained when he's loose, and with Simpson emerging in year 2, You have Fernandez now. I mean, Griffiths is a shooter. He's the type of guy that can spot up and, will capitalize in transition. Mawat Mag was great in transition last year. Hyatt can run. Antoine Wolfolk is a very mobile big. I think this team has an opportunity to play a little bit of a different style. And I think Cliff would benefit from that style. So we'll see. But obviously, ultimately for me, he brings balance. Just in terms of his improvement that he's had defensively, all Big Ten defender last year. I really think he could be better this year. He can improve on both ends of the court. And I think that two things. One, I think from an NIL perspective, I think there's been some misunderstanding there. He's an international student, right? So he can't receive NIL in a traditional way that all the other student athletes can. He did receive NIL last year, but he had to donate it to charity. However, the caveat is, right or wrong, is that overseas he can receive NIL. Rutgers has a overseas trip in August. John Goodman actually confirmed the dates and the destinations. It's going to be in Senegal and Portugal from August 8th through 19th. I have to imagine Rutgers has some NIL opportunities lined up for him, and that was played a role in his return. So that's big. And in addition to that, I think, listen, we have to give Steve Pikiell credit here. I think that his approach over the last few years, with Geo Baker, with Ron Harper Jr., with Caleb McConnell, now with Cliff and Paul, who we'll get to in a minute, but have not heard about yet. He gives them space. He's patient. He allows them to go through the process. He encourages them to go through the process. He has said multiple times that, Rutgers producing pro players is good for the program as much as it's good for the player. So I know that if Cliff, got drafted, if he made it, signed a two-way deal, whatever it was, he would have been really happy and it would have been a positive for Rutgers. Obviously, they're thrilled he's coming back. And they've been on hold in terms of how to move forward in terms of the front court. Now they know they're going to pursue a backup big man. And between, Wolf and Cliff and Mag, whenever he returns, potentially Hyatt can slide into that that four spot. But I think that Pikiell's approach, I think, he's showing that he is able to adapt to the transfer portal, to the NBA evaluation process, in terms of how he's approaching the team and the style and strategy. But I think in this case, Cliff was one of all the guys that were potentially leaving early for the NBA draft. Cliff was the biggest threat to leave. He was the most realistic to leave early. Ron technically did, but he left after 4 years. He gave up his COVID year. Cliff has only been at Rutgers 3 years, so this would have been a true early departure. And it was close. It was close. Me talking about the G League being an option, it wasn't a coincidence. I wasn't just making that up. That was a real threat. And again, he was signed with an NBA certified agent. They obviously had their motivations for Cliff to stay in the draft. But ultimately, Cliff did what he felt was best for him. It happens to be what's best for Rutgers. It's a win-win. And we needed a good win-win after the last couple weeks. In terms of the roster now, so we know we have Cliff, Wolf, Mag, TBD in terms of his return. And then you have Hyatt. You have Hyatt along with Griffiths and Chol on the wing. And then you have Fernandez. You have Simpson. Jermichael Davis, his signing has not been announced. I'm very confident he's going to be on the Rutgers roster next season. He's in the backcourt. And then you have Paul. Paul, we have not heard from yet. It's midday on the 31st. We'll see what he, ultimately does, whether he even announces today. Paul, is going to do what Paul wants to do, and hopefully he returns. I think it's pretty confident that he will withdraw from the draft. The NBA will announce it formally at some point. But, he may just choose not to make an announcement today. That just could be what he decides. So he's got, things going on, and I think he likes to do things on his own in terms of his timeline. So give him that space. If he announces today, I'll be back with a podcast on that. But obviously, I've preached that his return would mean a lot to the program as well. And even though I'm saying I think Rutgers should go more up tempo, I think Paul could thrive in that system too. He's a great passer, and passing is huge in playing a more fast paced. It's not just about dribbling up and down the court. He's got great vision. And I think that, having Cliff also as such a tremendous rebounder um, allows them to get out on the break faster. So listen, you get an outlet pass from Cliff to Paul, and boom, you got two options up the wing. Whether it's Gavin on the left, Fernandes on the right. I mean, this team could really move. So, huge news having Cliff back. First player in 32 years to lead Rutgers in scoring, rebounding, and block shots in one season. Did that last year, beat Cam Spencer by 1 point in terms of total scoring. And he's back. So to get him back is just, you can't really overstate it. I don't think it's absolutely huge. And I think Steve Pikiell and the staff deserve great credit, not only for giving him the space and time that he needed to make that decision, but also for having a program that he wants to come back to. If I've heard rumblings, there were teams that were approaching him when he was at the G League draft camp to enter the portal, to keep his options open if he returned. Cliff can't enter the transfer portal now without sitting out a year. He's not a grad transfer, so he's as safe to return as anyone at this point. But yeah, teams were trying to get him to enter the portal while he was going through the NBA draft evaluation process. So Rutgers was able to keep him. And you have to tip your cap to Pikiell and the staff for getting him back. You have to tip your cap to Cliff for wanting to come back. You tip your cap to Pikiell for having a program that Cliff wants to come back to. So we can hype up and lament, these defeats and losses, with the NIL and decommitments and all this, but you have to celebrate the wins too and recognize why the wins happened. And it was really equal parts Cliff wanting to come back and also Pikiell, everything that he's done with the program. So tremendous news all the way around. Really excited to see this team. This puts them firmly, as an NCAA tournament contender. Now, what do? They go out, they need a shooter, whether that's a guard, whether it's a wing, you need a shooter. And then you need another big. And assuming Paul comes back, I think that's it. You have 12 roster spots. You'll leave a roster spot open. I do think that Pikiell, he's done that traditionally. He gives a 13 spot to a walk-on. He's probably going to do that again. I think with the way that it's a 1-year roster, even though, listen, I'm a big depth guy. I never think you can have enough depth. That being said, basketball, you're not going to play more than 10 guys at most. Obviously, if you get decimated by injuries, you're not in good shape anyway. So I think I'll probably add 2 in the portal, assuming Mulcahy comes back. So we'll see. But you got to get a shooter at this point to replace Cam, whether that's a wing or a guard, and you got to get another big man, probably a backup 5. You have Wolf as a 4-5 flex, and this team, is really athletic. Don't sleep on Jamichael Davis's athleticism, by the way. Gavin Griffiths, is really versatile. So really exciting news, and it worked out. So it doesn't always work out. Believe in hope, and hope worked out on Wednesday, May 31st. We'll wait and see on what Paul Mulcahy announces or is announced by the NBA, whether he withdrew. I may, if he doesn't formally announce, it might just be an article I put out, but we'll see. Maybe we'll get another podcast video today. We'll see what happens. But for now, Cliff Omoruyi is back at Rutgers for a 4th season, and that is good news all the way around. Their ceiling just went back up for the season, the 2023-24 season, and lots more to discuss soon with the roster and potential options to be added. But now this gives Rutgers a clear path now in the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks tops, to fill out the roster. So exciting times. Welcome back, Cliff. And thanks for listening and watching and reading all my coverage at the Scarlet Faithful. once again.